Good morning. I'm Crystal Jacob, Vice Chair of the Ulster Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I'd like to welcome you to the Chamber's virtual breakfast meeting, coming to you live from the 721 Media Center in Kingston. We have an amazing program this morning, celebrating the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. This morning, we are delighted to welcome a good friend of ours to lead us in the pledge to the flag. Born and raised in Kingston, she left KHS at age 16 to pursue her dream to become a lawyer so she could represent people that come from areas of discrepancy. She attended SUNY Albany and SUNY New Paltz. While working locally, she and her husband started a grassroots organization called Concerned Black Citizens. She went on to serve as Kingston Alderwoman for 3 terms and later became Ulster County Human Rights Commissioner. We are proud and privileged to introduce Nina Dawson for the pledge to the flag.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very momentous occasion. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance if everyone can join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This pledge has newfound meaning with the times that we're actually experiencing now. I'm very happy to be a part of such a momentous occasion.
Thank you, Nina. Before we introduce our speakers this morning, I'd like to share with you some of the work that your Chamber of Commerce has been focused on as we support and sustain more than 1,000 members during this difficult time. With pertinent information on our recovery occurring rapidly, the Chamber of Commerce transformed our Chamber website into the central clearinghouse for all local, regional, state, and federal news and information. If you are unsure about the latest regulations for your business, be sure to check the Chamber's website at ulsterchamber.org and click on the link that says COVID-19 Resources for Business. And if you need further assistance or have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact the Chamber office at 845-338-5100, because we are here for you. The Ulster Chamber Foundation is preparing to welcome another class of future leaders to the next Leadership Ulster class, which will begin this fall. With more information about the class and the important application process, we'd like to welcome the Foundation's Executive Director, Ingrid Kulik.
Good morning, everyone. This is such a profound time for all leaders. So investing in the development of our future leaders is essential for the well-being of our families, our businesses, and our communities. According to Forbes magazine, leaders need to be honest, have a demonstrated track record of success, be excellent communicators, place an emphasis on serving those they lead, be fluid in approach, have a laser focus, and drive toward action. In uncertain times, people are looking to leaders for direction, support, and hope. Success will ultimately emerge from linking and leveraging expertise, resources, and inspiration across traditional organizational boundaries. This is your it moment. Now and in the months ahead, how you lead really matters. That's why I encourage you to consider Leadership Ulster for yourself or for an individual with leadership potential as yet undeveloped within your organization. Leadership Ulster is quite intensive. It's a regionally oriented leadership development program designed to give potential and emerging leaders the skills, knowledge, and ongoing support they need to succeed. This 9-month program challenges individuals from diverse backgrounds to be influential in our region's future. Recognized community leaders from Ulster County provide insights and facilitate dialogue in leadership development and challenges, hard-learned lessons, and different leadership approaches. Participants are guided through real-world situations presented by these accomplished professionals, thereby bringing them face-to-face with relevant business, public policy, and social issues. In addition, each participant completes the DISC profile and studies how their style can work best with differing styles. We also host sessions on emotional labor, racial injustice, wicked problem solving, communication, public speaking, and moderation skills, and board governance and accountability. Businesses and community organizations are urged to nominate and sponsor individuals who have demonstrated leadership qualities or have leadership potential. You know, so many times an individual has capability, and we'll see that in an individual. And yet that individual lacks the confidence or the practice to move forward and step out in a leadership capacity. Leadership Ulster provides a safe environment, a place to make some mistakes, a place to get some honest feedback from classmates and presenters, and a chance to learn that so many of our county's leaders, we're just real people too. And we've all made mistakes, and we're willing to share those stories, those lessons learned with the students in the classroom in such a wonderful way. So I want you to know that a limited number of scholarship funds are available to the nonprofit community to cover all or part of the tuition, thanks to our donors. Registration is now open for Leadership Ulster class of 2021. The Chamber and Chamber Foundation have been hosting this leadership development program for 28 years, and we are now close to 450 graduates. So depending on the COVID-19 landscape this fall, we're prepared for either in-person or virtual sessions. One way or another, we go forward and we work to help develop our future leaders. Succession planning is always on the schedule. Our application deadline is August 1st of this summer. Applications are available at ulsterchamberfoundation.org. And if you have any questions or thoughts about the program, give me a call at 845-389-1358 or email me at ingrid@ulsterchamber.org. We look forward to welcoming you this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm a graduate of the Ulster Leadership Program, and I still refer to the skills that I learned in that program on a regular basis. So good luck to this year's class. Next month, the Chamber's virtual breakfast meeting will showcase some of the top tourism properties in Ulster County, as they are now reopening or planning to reopen. Our program, Ulster County is a world-class vacation destination, will feature an inside, behind-the-scenes look at Mohonk Mountain House, the Rocking Horse Ranch, Emerson Resort and Spa, and the Pine Ridge Dude Ranch. Be sure to join us right here from the 721 Media Center on Wednesday, July 22nd, starting at 9 o'clock. This program would not be possible without our amazing partners at Ulster County Tourism Office. Thanks to the Tourism Director, Rick Remsnyder, for agreeing to be our co-host that morning. Once again, be sure to be with us as we live stream on July 22nd, our virtual breakfast meeting from the 721 Media Center. It will also be available on the Chamber's Facebook page. Now, to introduce our program this morning, here is the Chamber's Director of Membership Engagement, Jess Davis.
Thank you, Crystal. Good morning, Ulster County. Our sponsor for this morning's historic breakfast meeting is an organization with rich history as well. We are delighted to welcome from the Girl Scouts Heart of the Hudson, their CEO, Marie Rieger.
I am the CEO of Girl Scouts Heart of the Hudson, and we are honored to be sponsoring this morning's Ulster County Chamber of Breakfast. Girl Scouts has had a presence in Ulster County for over 100 years, with a long history steeped in tradition, almost as long as the Girl Scout movement itself. While Girl Scouts began in 1912, Girl Scout activities began not long after in Ulster County in 1916. Around 1923, Mrs. George Halliday, better known as Marion Borden, began offering her family property to be used by the girls. First used as a resident camp in 1924 and known today as Camp Wendy, the Wallkill Camp is known to thousands. Girl Scouts Heart of the Hudson serves girls in the 7 counties of Ulster, Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, Rockland, Sullivan, and Westchester. We currently serve over 21,000 girls in grades K through 12, as well as over 10,000 adult members each year, over 1,000 of which are in Ulster County. Since the early days of Girl Scouting, Girl Scouts has been providing girls with extraordinary programming. With more than 100 years of experience, we bring a wealth of knowledge to programs that deliver girls experiences with benefits to last throughout their lives. Everything we do, from troop meetings to our world-famous cookie program and camping, to STEM and robotics programs, are all girl-led, and girl-focused. The Girl Scout leadership experience supports the skills girls learn in a safe, inclusive space where girls are empowered to take the leadership role, have an exciting adventure, and build new skills. I also think it's important that Girl Scouts is a safe place where girls can try new things and sometimes succeed and sometimes fail. As we all know that when we take risks, we sometimes fail, and we learn so much more from our failures than our successes. Girl Scouts offers the opportunity to earn one of the most renowned, challenging, and prestigious youth awards in the world, the Girl Scout Gold Award. The Gold Award recognizes young women who have designed service projects that tackle community issues such as poverty, the environment, and social justice. Gold Award Girl Scouts are top contributors to their communities and consistently report greater success than their peers in reaching life goals in everything from higher education to their careers to their life skills. By combining these one-of-a-kind experiences, Girl Scouts is creating the female leadership pipeline for America. And the need for female leadership has never been clearer. At Girl Scouts, we're working every day to create the GIRLS, the girls, the go-getters, the innovators, the risk-takers, and the leaders that our world so desperately needs. From corporations looking to expand their STEM workforce to organizations desperate for cyber programmers, our programs give girls the skills they need today for the future of tomorrow. Civic engagement programs spark a lifelong sense of patriotism and commitment to our nation. The Girl Scouts' emphasis on civics education and civic engagement began in 1918 with the first civics badge and in 1920 with a citizen's badge. While 2020 marks the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, Girl Scouts have been involved in the suffragist movement from the beginning. Key leaders in the movement who were also suffragists included Edith Carpenter Macy and Sarah Birdsall Otis Eady. Edith Macy, who was chairman of the Executive Council of the Girl Scouts National Board from 1919 to 1925, was also active in the League of Women Voters. Given the increase in girl-led activism and women's representation in politics and the growing national conversation on issues tackling gender equity and the women's leadership pipeline, public interest in celebrating this landmark achievement could not be more relevant. In the United States, most of the female astronauts, 80% of female tech leaders, 70% of current senators, and 50% of female business owners are Girl Scout alumni, which is why I was not at all surprised to learn that today's panelists, all of which are former Girl Scouts. In March of this year, when most things girls were looking forward to were canceled or postponed, Girl Scouts did not stop. We switched to a virtual platform, which enabled us to continue to support and serve our girls and volunteers. Since March, we have continued to provide programs and activities virtually to keep our girls and volunteers engaged. Girls have also remained engaged civically through the cookie program by finding ways to have Girl Scout cookies be donated to first responders and frontline workers. They've written cards of encouragement to the elderly and veterans in isolation and made masks for members of their communities. Each and every day, Girl Scouts are building girls of courage, confidence, and character that make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And thank you for the meaningful work that Girl Scouts Heart of the Hudson does here for us in our community. Before we get to our program, we'd like to thank our good friends here at 721 Media Center, including Ellen Bogan Creative Media, for live streaming our event today. Ellen Bogan Media has been on the forefront of media industry, helping companies, government, and organizations communicate through audio and video for 30 years. Whether it's live streaming, video production, event audio video, or digital marketing services, discover how Ellen Bogan can help your business during these difficult times and into the future. Visit ellenbogan.com or call them at 845-33-VIDEO. As Director of Membership Engagement here at the Ulster County Chamber, I could not be more proud nor honored to be given this opportunity to co-host this morning's breakfast meeting along with Crystal Jacob, who is also the AVP Training Officer at Ulster Savings Bank and serves as Vice Chair-elect on the Ulster County Board of Directors. Today, along with our guest speakers, we will make herstory as we present to you the very first women-only led chamber breakfast meeting in the 117-year history of the Ulster County Chamber. This committee of women was brought together by Chamber President Ward Todd in early January to begin to plan a celebration of 100 years of women's right to vote. It has been inspiring to work on this project with these local women that have made a difference and have paved the way for other women. This morning, we will celebrate many firsts for women, and it should be noted the first female chair of the Ulster County Chamber Board was elected as the chair in 1982. Joan Iskro, later Joan Iskro Grant, was a real estate broker who owned Ulster County Realty. I would like to introduce our first presenter. After earning her education at George Washington University and New York State University in 1972, she was engaged in private practice, served as an assistant district attorney in Dutchess County, and worked as an assistant professor at SUNY New Paltz, where she taught courses on criminal law, gender discrimination and the law, and civil rights and civil liberties. In 1979, Justice Peters was selected as the first counsel for the newly created New York State Division of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse. In 1983, she became the director of the New York State Assembly Government Operations Committee. Justice Peters' judicial career began in 1983 when she was elected as the first female Ulster County Family Court judge. She remained on the family court bench until 1992 when she was elected as the first woman Supreme Court Justice in the 3rd Department. Subsequently, on February 3, 1994, Justice Peters was appointed to the Appellate Division, 3rd Department by Governor Mario Cuomo. In 2012, Governor Cuomo appointed her to be the very first female presiding justice of the Appellate Division, 3rd Department of New York State, where she served until her retirement in 2017. She continues to stay active on many local and state commissions and boards. She has received many awards of honor and excellence, is an avid supporter of the arts, a passionate potter. She resides in the Hudson Valley, and without further ado, I proudly introduce the Honorable Karen K. Peters to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Jess, for that introduction. And I just want to share with all of you that it's a little difficult to be staring at a screen instead of the most extraordinary community members who one usually sees at these great virtual breakfasts. But I'm also very grateful to share this virtual dais with the powerful woman who will be speaking along with me today. We live in a great community, and we are all grateful for the achievement of those that are serving with me on this panel today. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about suffrage. And it's an extraordinary history we have here in New York State and in our country in this arena. Our country was founded upon egalitarian principles, but those principles only empowered and protected one segment of our society, white men. Our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, did not provide rights or protections to people of color, indigenous persons, the poor, or women. As the famous suffragette Susan B. Anthony put it, it was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor yet we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people who formed the Union. And we formed it not to give the blessings of liberty, but to secure them. Not to the half of ourselves and the half of our posterity, but to the whole people, women as well as men. It was not until 1870, with the passage of the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution, that all men, Black, white, and brown, were empowered to vote. 50 years later, we women finally got the right to vote. 100 years have now passed since the ratification of the 19th Amendment by Congress. This 100-year milestone was to be marked by celebrations, but the pandemic has dashed all that. While the 19th Amendment became the law of the land in 1920, we New Yorkers were forward-thinking even back then. New Yorkers voted to amend our state constitution to provide suffrage to women 3 years earlier than Congress voted to create a nationwide right to vote for women. We passed ours in 1917. Well, let me correct that, actually. It wasn't we forward-thinking New Yorkers that voted to amend our state constitution. It was forward-thinking male New Yorkers that made that change, and we thank them for it. But back to the national battle. In 1918, as suffragettes continued to make their case for amendment to the United States Constitution, pandemic struck. The Spanish flu dashed the hopes and the dreams of the radical women who marched and lectured and fought for a right to the say in their government. Their gatherings were banned because of the flu, and their leaders fell ill. The flu struck Carrie Chapman Catt, the leader of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which, along with the National Women's Party, had struggled to achieve the momentum necessary to move Congress toward passage of this amendment. In a letter to suffrage workers, Ms. Catt wrote, "These are sad times for the whole world, grown unexpectedly sadder by the sudden and sweeping epidemic of influenza." Her words ring true today as well, as the pandemic limits us to virtual celebrations like the one we are having today. Yet interestingly, many historians believe that the Spanish flu epidemic, where nurses heroically treated the ill, combined with the US entry into World War I, which required that women fill the labor gaps left by men who'd gone off to war, that really turned the tide of public opinion towards supporting a woman's right to vote. The women we're talking about today were radicals. The old photographs might depict them as stodgy women, but truly, they really were radicals. Carrie Chapman Catt, while not born in New York, made our state her home in the 1920s. She was a radical. Upon her marriage in 1890, she arranged for a unique prenuptial agreement that specifically provided that she had the right every 4 months of every year to undertake suffrage activism. That is a radical prenuptial agreement. She succeeded Susan B. Anthony as president of the American Women's Suffrage Association and was central in the creation of the League of Women Voters. And while my time is limited this morning, so I can't share stories of all the amazing women who fought this war for women's rights, I want to spend a few minutes on some local heroes. Sojourner Truth, Hannah Johnson Bailey, Mary S. Hose Burhans, and Eleanor Roosevelt. But first, for a minute, let me just put the women's situation in perspective again. Historically, in the United States and elsewhere across the globe, women were property. As I mentioned, When independence from Britain was declared in 1776, that declaration and the challenges that came after it provided nothing for women. Once married, a woman could not own property in her own name. In fact, in New York, she couldn't own property in her own name until 1848. The campaign for the enactment of the Married Women's Property Act, led by Ernestine Rose, Paulina Wright Davis, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, led the way to the women's suffrage movement. It altered the law regarding the property rights of married women, allowing them to control their own destiny and their own property. That gave them power. In 1848, at the Seneca Falls First Women's Right Convention, a Declaration of Sentiments authored by Elizabeth Cady Stanton was approved. It listed, quote, upon the injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, that he has made her in the eye of the law, if married, civilly dead, and that he has taken from her all right in property, even to the wages she earns. The demand for suffrage was part of the Declaration of Sentiments, and the Seneca Falls Convention here in New York marked the beginning of the women's suffrage movement. The radical women we're talking about today changed the landscape of this country. They were masters at protesting, but they didn't just protest. They, along with the men who supported their cause, used all the tools of democracy to make their voice heard. They used the system to change the system. In 1894, local women added their voices to the statewide suffragist call to ensure that New York's Summer Constitutional Convention favor their position. In Ulster County, Mary S. Hose Burhans, who was chair of the Equal Suffrage Committee for the County of Ulster, reported riding miles and miles and revisiting homes repeatedly to get support for this issue. She creatively researched the financial institutions confronting suffrage and reported that the disenfranchised women of the city of Kingston pay taxes on real and personal property amounting to $2,648,964 in value. That is a strong argument that women should have a say in the government. But even with that argument, New York State Constitutional Convention did not approve women's suffrage that year. Hannah Johnson Bailey was not a radical, but she was a publicist for peace. She was born in Cornwall-on-Hudson in 1839 to Quaker parents and attended school in Plattekill, New York. Consistent with Quaker beliefs, she viewed war as evil. She married a wealthy manufacturer, Moses Bailey, in 1868, and when he passed, he left her a substantial financial legacy, which she used to support her political activism. She joined the Women Christians Temperance Union and became superintendent of the organization. She was an ardent suffragist, a powerful voice for peace, temperance, and a creative thinker and writer. Our most famous local suffrage supporter was Sojourner Truth. Born in slavery here around 1797 and originally named Isabella Baumfree, she was owned by the Hardenbergs. At the age of 9, she was sold away from her parents to John Neely near Kingston. He bought her and a flock of sheep for $100. Twice more she was sold, once to a tavern keeper in Port Ewan, and then to John Dumont of West Park. In 1826, she, as she described it, walked away from slavery with her youngest child, having suffered beatings, deprivation, rape, and the selling away of her own children. Dumont was the slave owner who sold Sojourner Truth's son Peter into slavery in Alabama in defiance of a New York law which had already freed him. As many of you know, Sojourner Truth won her son's freedom from slavery right here in Ulster County at the Ulster County Courthouse. A monument to her rests on the lawn of our courthouse. Later, she had a divinely inspired vision and left her former identity, naming herself Sojourner Truth. She began speaking against slavery. She was a highly visible, eloquent, and emotional abolitionist, and she linked the oppression of slavery with the oppression of women. She spoke at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention in 1851 and delivered her most famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" Let me spend just a few minutes on another famous person from the Hudson Valley, Eleanor Roosevelt. Interestingly, she did not come early to the support of women's suffrage. Actually, it was her husband, Franklin, who came out in support first. She later admitted that at that time, she took it for granted that men were superior creatures and still knew more about politics than women did. But by 1911, she'd come around. She considered herself a suffragist, and she came to support the League of Women Voters for the rest of her life. In fact, she became famous for her support for women's rights, equality, and finally called herself a feminist. Today, the legacy of the suffragists remains unfulfilled. I wish I could tell you it was fulfilled, but actually it's not. After ratification of the 19th Amendment 100 years ago, many women knew that their work was not complete. The National Women's Party drafted the Equal Rights Amendment in 1923 to guarantee equal rights to all people, regardless of their gender. While finally ratified by both houses of Congress in the 1970s, the ERA failed to get sufficient support from the states. And I regret to tell you, we have yet to see the ERA become law. So let me close, as I began, with Carrie Chapman Catt. Her call to action, I think, rings so very true today. She said, "To the wrongs that need resistance, to the rights that need assistance, to the future in the distance, give yourselves." Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Peters. Let me introduce you to the next presenter this morning. She started with the Ulster County Clerk's office in 1979, becoming Deputy County Clerk in 1982. She served in the capacity of Chief Deputy County Clerk for 15 years. Upon the retirement of Albert Spada, she was appointed by Governor Pataki as Acting County Clerk. She had the honor of being elected the 45th and first female Ulster County Clerk and took office in January 2006 to present. I introduce to you Nina Postupack, Ulster County Clerk.
Thank you, Jess. Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Chamber for inviting me to celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote federally. I'm honored to be part of the program today and to join such an amazing group of women. It's an inspiration. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to recognize the women who came before us and who have given us the opportunities we enjoy today. A few years before the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1917, New York State became one of the first states on the East Coast to ratify the vote for women, as has been mentioned before. In 2000, it's frozen. Should I keep going? Okay, all right. A few years, let me see where. In 2017, to celebrate 100 years of women's suffrage in New York State, the county clerk's office partnered with the Ulster County Historical Society and the Ellenville Public Library Museum on a project. It was entitled Women of Note. The project consisted of a traveling exhibit of 16 panels featuring women of note from Ulster County, and it culminated in a reenactment of a suffrage march and rally. It was very, very exciting collaboration. And speaking of collaboration, this was a core element of the project from the beginning. Each of the exhibit panels were submitted by a different Ulster County organization, including Saugerties Historical Society, Craigsmore Historical Society, Historic Huguenot Street, Friends of Historic Kingston, Stone Ridge Public Library, the Gomez Mill House, the Historical Society of Woodstock, and the Klein Aesopus Museum. The project was funded through a grant awarded by the New York Council for the Humanities. And what made it so special was all of these organizations coming together to create this exhibit. So the traveling exhibit was unveiled for the first time at the Person House in 2016. For the next year, the exhibit traveled to various sites, including the Marbletown Town Hall, the Ellenville Public Library, the Stone Ridge Library, Roundout Valley High School, Saugerties Historical Society, and eventually concluding in October 2017 at the Woodstock Historical Society. The exhibit was inspiring, and I hope some of you had the chance to see it while it made its way throughout Ulster County. So I thought today what I would do is I would like to highlight some of the women of note, as many of them were suffragettes who fought for women's right to vote. And the first woman I like to speak about is Martha Grewing. Martha was born into a prominent and socially progressive family in 1889. Her father, Emil, ran free ophthalmology clinics for the poor and served as a trustee of the Nation, which her brother Ernest edited. Her sister Mary ran Madison Street Settlement House in New York City, and her sister Clara started a birth control rights organization with Mary War Dennett. So it was clear that Martha was inspired by her father and her siblings. A graduate of Smith College and NYU Law School, Martha engaged actively in cases concerning with women's right to vote. She was a civil rights pioneer, joining the NAACP and contributing to its magazine, The Crisis. Martha also fought for reforming workers' conditions in factories and industry. She protested against American intervention in World War I, for which she was arrested in Philadelphia. Her progressive views were proclaimed in a series of articles she wrote for magazines at that time. At her premature death in 1937, at the age of 38, very young, she was working to open a progressive school based on the philosophy of her mentor, Will Durant, on the grounds of the Gomez Mill House. The next woman of note I'd like to highlight is Dorothy Frooks. Born in Saugerties in 1896, Dorothy was an author, a military figure, and lawyer. Her began as one of Ulster County's youngest suffragettes. This is very interesting. She delivered her address, Votes for Women, at the age of 12 in Tannersville. And this was noted in the New York Times on August 27th, 1911. She was often the first speaker at suffragist rallies. And the reason was they hoped that presenting a young girl would deter the troublesome behavior that sometimes happened at rallies. She worked as a writer for the New York Evening World and published the Murray Hill News in 1952. She also wrote a pamphlet entitled Labor Courts Outlaw Strikes, calling for the establishment of a labor court. Dorothy wrote numerous fiction and nonfiction books, including The Olympic Torch, The American Heart, and Lady Lawyer, which was her autobiography. She practiced law in Peekskill, New York, and during that time, she served as the first attorney for the Salvation Army. She helped to establish free legal clinics, and she lobbied Mayor LaGuardia to establish the first small claims court. Dorothy served as chief yeoman in the U.S. Navy. That's the highest ranking woman during World War I. She was employed in the Judge Advocate's Office of the U.S. Army and was presented with a medal by President Woodrow Wilson. In 1986, at the age of 90, Dorothy married J.P. Vanderbilt and remained his wife until her death in 1997. And now, as I mentioned, there were 16 panels, but the last woman to note that I have time to mention today, and please remember that all 16 women had amazing accomplishment, but the third woman I'd like to mention today is Mary Isabella Forsythe. So Mary Isabella, rather than relying on her lineage as a member of one of Kingston's oldest and most prominent families, she was a woman who dedicated her life to the betterment of the less fortunate citizens. Her most outstanding contribution was initiating the founding of the Dusty Home in 1876. This home cared for neglected or destitute children and the aged. Its motto was seek and save, and you can find that on its official seal. The Dusty Home was on East Chester Street in Kingston, and it still exists today as the Children's Home of Kingston, dedicated to serving troubled youth. In 1893, Mary Isabella founded the local chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution and served as its first regent. An author and poet, she penned a local history, The Beginnings of New York, Kingston, the first capital, published in 1909. In 1915, she was a signee of the deed donating family land for a park to the city of Kingston, and it stated, for the quiet enjoyment and benefit of the public. Thus, Forsyth Park was started. She remained active in her service to the Children's Home for 38 years until her death in 1914. So the traveling exhibit coincided with a reenactment of a suffrage march and rally. This took place at Gallo Park on the Roundout in Kingston in October of 2017. And it was an amazing experience for me to become part of this interactive program. We had costumed actors that engaged in discussions on the women's rights movement. And following the rally, the group marched to the home port building of the Maritime Museum, where guests were treated to two reenactors portraying Sojourner Truth and Abby Kelly Foster. We were brought back in time to those moments. In addition, Girls Inc. brought volunteers to help guests design their own suffragette sashes, and we set up a table to help young people register to vote. The Women of Note project went on to win a Greater Hudson Heritage Award for Excellence in 2017. It was a resounding success in more ways than one, and I was very happy that the county clerk's office could be part of it from the very beginning, honoring these women who were committed to the betterment of our community. So this initiative really inspired our office to develop an exhibit recently to pay tribute to women's history. In February, we started an exhibit series titled the Historical Profile Series, which is a traveling exhibit focusing on individuals in Ulster County's history. For Women's History Month in March, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote, we released an exhibit featuring Dr. and suffragette Alice Devine from Ellenville. And she has an amazing story. Alice Devine was born in 1868 and was very active in the political community in her early adulthood. She served on the Ulster County Equal Suffrage Committee, which was a subcommittee of the New York State Women's Suffrage Association. In 1894, at the age of 26, she served as an equal suffrage canvasser in Ellenville for this committee. Along with her local committee members, Alice helped to obtain signatures of support from 970 citizens of Wawarsing, the third most signatures of any town in Ulster County for that year. 6 years later, Alice Devine obtained her medical license and became a prominent physician in Ulster County, working alongside local doctors such as George Chandler, who originated the New York State Troopers and is the namesake of Chandler Drive in Kingston. The document you see here is Dr. Devine's Physicians and Surgeons Affidavit, which is held in the Ulster County Archives. We hope to feature more suffragettes in the Historical Profile series moving forward, as it is such an important part of our history. The Women in Note exhibit was a monumental accomplishment, and I'd like to thank you all again for allowing me the time to share some of it with you today. As the first woman Ulster County Clerk, I'm proud to be part of a legacy of women and proud to be part of the women presenters today, engaging in politics and having their voices heard at the local level. We owe so much to the women who came before us and fought so we could participate in the political process in the form of one of our most hallowed rights outlined by the Constitution, the right to vote. Thank you all once again.
Thank you, Nina, County Clerk. And thank you to you and your team today for all of the contributions with the history and the research and providing these amazing slides to our team this morning. That takes us to the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League is a people's organization that has fought since 1920 to improve our government and engage all Americans in the decisions that impact their lives. They operate at national, state, and local levels through more than 800 state and local leagues in all 50 states, as well as in DC, the Virgin Islands, and Hong Kong. Today I introduce to you together Jennifer Clark, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson region, and Cynthia Bell, President of the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson region. Today, I introduce to you Jennifer Clerk, Vice President of the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson region, and Cynthia Bell, President of the League of Women Voters of the Mid-Hudson region.
My question is going to start with Carrie Chapman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear earlier. Cats. The idea was to have women in states who had the right to vote. Cat's idea gained momentum as other suffragist leaders recognized that the vote alone would not be enough to advance the right of women. She put forth the proposal again at the Association's 1919 convention, and at the Association's 1920 convention, the National American Women's Suffrage Association officially became the League of Women Voters. The League was to continue the work of the association in guaranteeing to serve as a consultant to the U.S. delegation, and was one of the first organizations officially recognized by the UN as a non-governmental organization. In the 1950s, the League recognized the need to separate its issues advocacy from its educational role. It established the Education Fund to encourage the active and informed participation of citizens in government and to increase understanding of major public policy issues. Its advocacy for good government and non-discrimination continued, and leagues across the nation focused on both efforts. What has always been important to the League is its grassroots origin. Like its predecessor, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, the League is not now, nor has it ever been, a solely national organization. Rather, in addition to the National League, each state has its own league, and within each state, there are multiple local leagues. In New York, for example, there are currently 47 local leagues. And I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, our president of the local league of the Mid-Hudson region, to tell you about its history and contributions to this local area.
Thank you, Jen, and good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be a part of this panel, that is for sure. Empowering voters and defending democracy. This is our tagline today, but it doesn't tell the whole story of our League of Women Voters. In 1960, Ulster County was home to 4 local leagues: Kingston, Woodstock, Saugerties, and New Paltz. Kingston had been granted provisional status in 1959 and a full charter in 1960, followed shortly thereafter by Saugerties. Early on, there was an extensive study of the Kingston Library's funding problems and the first of several family court studies, this one regarding the unnecessary complexity of the court system. Our league's research wrote and published several citizen resources, including a 61-page handbook of Ulster County. This book is filled with demographic, geographic, and governmental information. It was first published in 1963 and was distributed through businesses, banks, shops, and supermarkets throughout the county. IBM was the major economic and social hub of the Hudson Valley. Ulster County Community College was nothing more than a good idea, and Medicare and Medicaid did not exist. Permanent personal registration wasn't enacted in Ulster County until 1963, so our citizens had to register to vote each and every year. By 1964, as a host of socioeconomic changes swept the country, public voter registration, a trademark lead activity, began here in earnest. All 4 local leagues began an intensive 3-year study in 1967 of the forerunner of our current county charter, resulting in overwhelmingly positive support from members. Unfortunately, the concept was not supported by the county's powers that be, and the issue was never brought to the public for comment at the time. Our current charter was finally adopted by a public referendum in 2008, and we remain committed to being guardians of this effective and superior form of government. It wasn't until 1971 that League members first began being identified as themselves when women's names finally appeared under their Freeman photos. Until then, they were known only as, for instance, Mrs. William Askew, despite numerous requests from Elizabeth, Jan, Renee, Vivian, and many others, reflecting once again significant shifts in public policy and opinion. The Equal Rights Amendment was prominent in national politics, and while it began with and maintains widespread support, is yet to be enacted. A committee was formed in 1979 to look into the possible Steamtown, USA Catskill Gateway project, collecting 800 questionnaires to gauge public opinion and walking the old rails to assess their current state. This project did not gain support at the time, but we now know it as the Ashokan Rail Trail, an amazing resource for appreciation of the Catskills' natural beauty and an economic boon to the county. In 1973, men were welcomed into the League of Women Voters. A name change was seriously considered, but rejected for fear another organization might co-opt the name, along with all the credibility and trust that the founding women had worked so hard to earn and still do. The League is fiercely nonpartisan and never supports parties or candidates, though we do sometimes wholeheartedly and occasionally loudly support important issues after thorough study and thoughtful debate amongst ourselves. The 1980s and 90s were in large part dedicated to preservation of natural resources, waste reduction, recycling, and Hudson River cleanup efforts. I joined the League in the latter part of those years and feel honored to have been a part of this effort. We worked hard to help mitigate what was known then as the trash crisis in Ulster County, with education and action on the new 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle. As League member Barbara Patrick said, it isn't garbage until you mix it all together. The fight for clean air and water continues. The introduction of plastic bags for use in supermarkets in 1987 was another issue all of the local League presidents spoke out against. Their sentiments were echoed in a Freeman editorial stating that if an animal ate a paper bag, it wouldn't hurt them unless it contained a sandwich in a plastic bag. Our League proudly supported Ulster County's recent styrofoam and single-use plastic bag bans. Time went on, more women went to work, and life became busier with less time for volunteering. Economies of scale led to a significant consolidation of local chapters. One by one, Poughkeepsie, Woodstock, New Paltz, Kingston, and Saugerties leagues became one. Our amalgamated Mid-Hudson Region League remains strong with 140 active members in 2 counties, studying issues, taking action, educating, and looking toward the future. We are still dedicated to our core values of voter education and engagement, environmental stewardship, responsible government, and making sure all citizens' voices are heard. Our proposed 2020 studies are COVID-19's effect on Ulster County's revenue and understanding bail reform. We hope to use these studies to push for improvements at the state level. We continue to provide a robust presence in the community, organizing events of local interest, including one held just before this year's quarantine in mid-March. The topic was food waste, and it was presented at the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park. It featured a tasting with Chef Alex, who heads a kitchen that uses only the leftover food from all the other campus kitchens to create amazing menus. The tasting was followed by expert speakers and a screening of the film Wasted. Throughout the years, our league has shown up at hundreds of fairs, festivals, and events, staffing voter registration tables, sponsoring numerous candidate forums, and moderating hundreds of others. We strive to improve public understanding through programs focusing on issues of current local interest, most recently including election security, early voting, and tenant rights. The way we are able to do so much is through organizing and working together as partners and friends. This is especially true today as we all learn new and innovative ways to communicate and share information. The League's online voter and candidate information resource, vote411.org, is live as we speak. Our website, lwvmidhudson.org, is both interesting and informative, and we maintain a busy Facebook presence as well. Our members have sat on numerous public committees, audited thousands of governmental functions, and learned our expertise and collaborated with other organizations to answer the call to action. The League provides outstanding support, often including materials and training to help us make a positive impact on the challenges facing today's society. It is a community of like-minded people who might belong to our book club, join a committee or study, participate in naturalization ceremonies, promote voter education, or just get together to share ideas, a cup of coffee, and a few laughs. The League is very flexible and works with whatever level members choose to enjoy. We have a board that is active, engaged, and impressive in their skill sets and enthusiasm. They make it happen, and everyone is welcomed. For me, it's the best game in town. Eleanor Roosevelt once said the battle for the individual rights of women is one of long-standing, and none of us should countenance anything which undermines it. This is one of the many reasons the League of Women Voters still exists and remains critical and relevant to this day. That we've come a long way is an understatement. This journey started long before me and will carry on far into the future. For now, I'm honored to have been able to share a small part of our inspiring history with you and look forward to being a positive part of what the future holds. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Cynthia, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for the important work that you do. I also want to thank our audience for bearing with us through some minor technical difficulties. I think it's safe to say that we learn something new with each virtual event that we host. So, our next presenter is a native of Ulster County, and she has been with the Board of Elections since 2010. She was first elected to serve as Democratic Commissioner in 2017 by the Ulster County Democratic Party and was recently appointed for another term this spring. Proud to introduce Ashley Dittus.
Thank you, Jess, and good morning, everyone. I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the Board of Directors and for hosting this event, and to our morning sponsor, the Girl Scouts. I myself was a Girl Scout from the age of 6 until I was 18, and the Scouts instilled in me a sense of civic responsibility that has shaped the person that I am today. I also want to especially thank my fellow panelists this morning. These women are a force of nature in our community, and it has been a highlight of my year getting to work with them on this project and speak alongside them. When I was asked to participate in this program, I took it as an opportunity to honor the founding mothers who came before us right here at home in Ulster County. I wanted to look at this milestone through a lens of data, and I believe the numbers can tell us a story. As an elections commissioner, counting is a big part of the job. The numbers can tell us a lot of things. Some of them are obvious, like who won the election that year, what party had the biggest influence, but they can also tell us things that are less evident, especially when you look at them over longer periods of time. By taking this 100-year anniversary and breaking it down into 10-year segments, I was able to see by the numbers how the influence women have had in our political system grew and took shape. As I did this research, which took hours of hand counting the names of early electors from the first part of the 20th century, I had a lot of time to think about who they were as individuals too, and not just as a pool of numbers. I saw the names of 3 of my great-grandmothers appear in the 1920s. I saw the names of women appear who have been mentors to me, and thought about what they were like as young women. I thought about what these women's lives were like, what dreams they had for their daughters, and the pride they must have felt when casting their first ballot. The County Board of Elections system was founded after the Constitutional Convention of 1894, and since then the board has always kept meticulous records using the best available technology the times allowed. In the early 20th century, those records were produced as books of enrolled electors, cataloged by town and district and published annually. Every year voters had to re-register. There was no permanent voter roll until a few decades later in the 1960s, so this practice asks for voters to actively engage in signing up every year. Largely, though, this accounting process has basically remained unchanged. We still catalog our voters by their town and election district 100 years later, which makes it easy to track our progress over time. We have these historic books of enrolled electors in our office in Kingston, and I was able to comb through them to count out the names per town of the women who enrolled the board to vote. By doing so, I mapped out these 100 years of enrollment for Ulster County women to track how suffrage has shaped our political landscape. It did get easier over time as the board moved into digital records, first through microfilm and then to the database management tools that we have today. In 2020, I can now run lists in seconds that would take days for previous commissioners to compile. This first timeline slide shows the years spanning 1917 through the 1940s. We start with 1917 because on November 6th of that year, New York held its last election where only men could vote. In Ulster County, 13,854 men were registered, a majority of them in the Republican Party. Those electors had a proposition on the ballot, which when passed, would give women the same right that they had enjoyed for generations, and they voted to pass it, granting suffrage to their female contemporaries. 1 year later, in 1918, 17,307 voters registered. 5,158 of them were women. In 1920, women nationwide could vote due to the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Women in New York, having enjoyed this right for 3 years, already hit new highs in their local presence. So while their sisters around the country were voting for the first time, women in Ulster began to account for up to 35% of the electorate in towns like Port Ewan and Esopus. During the 1930s, when the country was in the era of Prohibition and the Great Depression, women inched toward equality in the electorate as towns such as Woodstock, Marbletown, Rosendale, and the city of Kingston saw percentages of 40% of women representing the vote. The presence of the Prohibition Party was gone from the voter roll, and most electors were Republican, with no clear division of party between the genders. By 1940, a full generation had passed since suffrage was granted, and with women being relied upon during wartime efforts, their impact on the ballot box was greater than ever. The women of New Paltz, Woodstock, and the city of Kingston accounted for nearly 50% of voters in their municipalities during that decade, and most of the other towns did not track that far behind. We can see in just this relatively short period of time how invalid the argument against women being able to vote truly was. These consistently upward trends coincided with women gaining more freedom in other sectors, like clerical work, education, and in labor union jobs. Before we move on to the next section of timeline, I want to pause to look more closely at that first year of voting, as it reveals some truths about Ulster County at the time. While men held 72% of the electorate in that first year, it is worthy to note that without women voting, the overall size of the voter pool would have decreased from the year before. The reason for that is timely in 2020 as we deal with voting during our own pandemic. 1918 was the height of the First World War, but also many Ulster County residents suffered from the devastating effects of the Spanish flu. Looking to the numbers for examples, the town of Olive saw an entire 10% decrease in their total electorate. So in that first year, 28% of county voters were women, but their presence varied greatly from town to town. The town of Ulster had the lowest percentage at 15%, while Wawarsing saw 34%. The city of Kingston, being the largest municipality, had a total of 1,553 women voting, the biggest group for a single township. Many of these early women electors registered in the Prohibition Party, which historically had natural allyship with groups of early women voters nationally, so much so that brewers around the country lobbied against suffrage because they feared prohibition. By mid-century, most towns saw parity among the sexes in the electorate, and some municipalities show women surpassing men in enrollment. In 1950, the City of Kingston women edged out their male contemporaries by a fractional 0.2%. When we get to the 1960s, women's emerging lead and elector size starts to show how impactful it truly can be. In the 1964 presidential election between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, women cast more ballots than men for the first time in history, something they will continue to do for all presidential elections since. The housewife vote becomes coveted among political campaigns from both sides of the aisle as they begin to include narratives about family values and pocketbook economics into their platforms. In the early 1970s, the voting age was reduced to 18, further expanding the electorate and emphasizing the voices of young Americans who desperately wished to engage with the political system at the height of the Vietnam War. During that decade, feminism, which started as a radical notion, begins to see its initiatives gain popularity with the Equal Rights Amendment conversation taking center stage. Locally, 2 women are elected to the county legislature for the first time in 1975. During the 1980s, enrollment continued to trend upward for women, as did the rate of women running for office. Town supervisor, a job only ever held by men in the past, is assumed by women, like Bea Havranek in the town of Rosendale. Our first speaker, Karen Peters, was elected to Family Court in 1983, reaching a milestone for the judicial branch that will continue through the decade as other women join her on the bench. Through the 90s, as enrollment rose past 100,000 in Ulster County, women led in the numbers. This translated to a new profile of women being sought by politicians for their vote. The term soccer mom becomes ubiquitous during the 1996 presidential election. Described as the key swing consumer in the marketplace and the key swing voters who will decide the election. These suburban middle-class women become such a huge block of voters that we see passage of family-oriented bills during this decade, like the Violence Against Women Act, Head Start, Megan's Law, and the Family Medical Leave Act, to name a few. By looking at how women shaped politics in Ulster County during the 50s to the 90s, I would be remiss in not highlighting the groundswell of women who first ran for office during the 70s and 80s. During a 10-year period between 1976 to 1986, 14 women were elected to the county legislature. Alice Tipp, Kathleen Quick, Barbara DiStefano, Marianne Umhay, Rosemarie Hogan, Eleanor Brown, Evelyn Lipton, Jacqueline Labarge, Kathleen Carey-Meem, Barbara Maselli, Laura Chasen, Susan Cummings, and Jeanette Provenzano shattered the glass ceiling and left a lasting mark on county government. They represented both sides of the political aisle, but more importantly than their political enrollment was the new and different perspectives they brought with them to government. In this final timeline slide, we see how in the last 20 years, there has been an acceleration in the role women have played in Ulster County politics. In 2006, our earlier speaker, Nina Postupack, was elected county clerk, marking the first time a woman won a non-judicial countywide elected office in Ulster County. In 2008, Kathy Meem became the first woman appointed to be Commissioner of Elections. Terry Bernardo was elected in 2012 to serve as the chair of the legislature, another first for a woman. That same year, Cecilia Kachek was elected to the state senate, becoming the first woman to represent Ulster County in that capacity. In 2016, Hillary Clinton ran for president, being the first woman to run under a major party for the office. In Ulster County, she won 52% of the vote. In January of 2017, women took to the streets in massive numbers both at home and around the world to protest during the Women's March. This new rise in activism led to more women running in record numbers in 2018. Known that year as the Blue Wave, it has also been referred to as the Pink Wave, as women dominated the ballot box, winning a record number of offices in midterm and state races, including Jen Metzger winning her bid for state senate over another woman, Ann Rabbitt of Orange County. A new trend of both parties running exclusively women in head-to-head elections has started to emerge in these last few years. In addition to the Metzger-Rabbitt race, Marge Gallagher and Lisa Cutton faced off for county comptroller last year. This trend can be directly associated with how women have now comfortably become the leading voting bloc in the county, and specifically how they dominate the Democratic Party, which has emerged in the last 20 years as the predominant party in Ulster. Much like in the 70s, when women began to run for local office, in the 1980s through today, women have swept the judicial branch. This wave of women running for judgeships in New York State is predominantly on display in Ulster County, as we have been lucky to have some of the most qualified legal minds of the state serve in our courthouses. The following 5 women have shaped the judicial system, bringing much needed diversity to the bench. Judges Mary Work and Sarah McGinty of the Surrogate Court, Judges Marianne Mizell and Carrie Savona of Family Court, and of course our Speaker Karen Peters, who was the first woman elected to the Supreme Court Third Department and the first woman to be presiding justice of the Third Department. Nowadays, you're more likely to stand in front of her honor, and that is remarkable. By celebrating this centennial milestone, we have reflected on the past to see how far we have come. Since 1920, women across the country have run for every level of elected office. In Ulster County, we currently account for 53% of the electorate. Of those women voters, the biggest bloc are Democratic women, representing nearly a quarter of all voters in Ulster County. Being one of those women myself, I feel responsibility to bring my own experiences to the work I do for the Board of Elections. Expanding the ability for people to vote and encouraging people to use their civic right is the goal. Last year, with the inclusion of early voting, we were given another way to make it easier for voters to cast their ballot. In Ulster County, we had more voters cast an early ballot than almost any other county in the state, only coming second to Columbia County. We were able to increase our overall turnout in a local election year by 38% from a low in 2015. Women have already expanded what it means to be an elected official. We see nurses, teachers, and women with military backgrounds running for office in larger numbers than ever before. 6 women ran to be the presidential candidate this year. Before that, there has never been more than 2 women competing at the same time in the Democratic and Republican primaries. Women who own small businesses, many of whom are with us this morning, have seen their presence grow in the last 15 years at around the same rate as their political counterparts, over 30% since 2007. And while we face a lot of the same roadblocks in the public and private sectors, such as the motherhood penalty and the gender pay gap, imposter syndrome, and the lack of representation for women of color, we're also at the helm of a positive movement for gender equality. Again, I come back to the numbers. The data not only shows forward motion, but many opportunities to take advantage of. Cultural progress is of little value unless there is a framework to channel mindset and behavior transformation into actions and results. So we have to make a promise to the girls who will be our leaders in the future to offer them inclusion and foster confidence. Being sponsored this morning by the Girl Scouts is inspiring because they represent that next generation who will move us along even further. We would be nowhere without the vision, leadership, tenacity, and drive of the women in our community. So I thank you all for joining us this morning. Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't inform all of you of how to register and become engaged in the voting process. Registering to vote is easier than ever, and the Board of Elections provides all the resources individuals need to register. Voters can register through the paper application, or if they have a DMV number, they can complete the application online, which is automatically transmitted to the county board. The deadline to register to vote for the November election is October 9th. As with registering, voting itself is easier than ever. Voters can choose to vote by absentee ballot by completing an application and submitting that to the board by October 27th. The use of voting this way has risen sharply this year with COVID, as people are choosing to vote through the mail-in process. With early voting, people can go to any of the early voting sites we designate and cast a ballot in the 9 days before the main Tuesday event. Early voting is ongoing right now for the Democratic presidential and Republican congressional primary elections at 3 sites, Edson School, New Paltz High School, and the Saugerties Senior Center. For the November election, early voting will begin on October 24th. Then there's Election Day, which this year falls on November 3rd, and will be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. For the primary, we have enacted social distancing safety precautions that will continue through the fall if the status of the virus does not change. I encourage everyone to visit our website, voteulster.com, for more information as we develop details over the summer. It has been an unpredictable election season so far, but we are committed at the board to providing a level of fair and free elections that voters expect and deserve. Lastly, to wrap up our morning and this great program, the Chamber has provided use of the song Standing on the Shoulders by the artist Earth Mama to commemorate this historic anniversary. We hope you enjoy it, and thanks for having me.
ones who came before me. I am stronger for their courage. I am wiser for their words. I am lifted by their longing for a fair and brighter future. I am grateful for their vision, for their toiling on this earth. We are standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before us. They are saints and they are humans. They are angels, they are friends. We can see beyond the struggles and the troubles and the challenge when we know that by our efforts things will be better in the end. They lift me higher than I could ever fly, carrying my burdens away. I imagine our world if ones who came before me. I am honored by their passion for our liberty. I will stand a little taller, I will work a little longer, and my shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me. They lift me higher than I could ever fly, carrying my burdens away. I imagine our world if they hadn't tried. We wouldn't be so very blessed today. I am standing on the shoulders of the ones who came before me. I am honored by their passion for our liberty. I will stand a little taller, I will work a little longer, and my shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me. My shoulders will be there to hold the ones who follow me.
Thank you, Ashley. That concludes today's breakfast meeting program. I think it's clear that we had quite a story to tell this morning, so thank you all for sticking with us through the program. On behalf of the Ulster County Chamber staff and Board of Directors, we would like to thank all of you for joining us this morning. Again, we thank our breakfast meeting sponsor, Girl Scouts Heart of the Hudson. We also thank our underwriting sponsor, Ellen Bogan Creative Media, located here at 721 Media Center, and Jeremy Ellenbogen for live streaming our event today. Judge Karen Peters, Ulster County Clerk Nina Postupack, League of Women Voters President Cynthia Bell, and Vice President Jennifer Clerk, and Democratic Commissioner Ashley Dittus, Allison Costanzo from the Chamber of Commerce, Crystal Jacob from Ulster Savings Bank, and Nina Dawson. We cannot thank you enough for your commitment, creative input, dedication of time, and overall passion that you all brought to this event. We would like to leave you with something to look forward to, and that is the announcement of our July breakfast meeting. Ulster County, a world-class vacation destination, which will take place virtually on July 22nd at 9 a.m. Last, but certainly not least, we will close by thanking our corporate sponsors for the support they provide to the Ulster County Chamber and the Ulster County small business community. Be safe, stay well.